My name is Joan Richardson. I am mostly a pediatrician and baby doctor, but I do help out the institution in terms of getting ready for emergencies and catastrophic events. We're together today, and I guess most people must be taking an early Memorial Day weekend, but we're here today to talk about hurricanes and to get ready for the upcoming hurricane season, which officially starts on June 1st. I want to start out by making just a few comments, and then I'll be passing things over to Dan Riley from the Weather Service. Debbie Conley is going to talk in more detail about some of the employee issues, time off, things like that. Lieutenant Cooper, safety and security, and Steve Campbell is going to end up by talking about communications. But just to get going in terms of some things to think about as we head into hurricane season, what I want to encourage you all to do, because it's been a while since we've had any issues with hurricanes. The last issue we had, of course, was back in 2008 with Ike, and we've had some relatively quiet years in the ensuing time. But what I want to encourage you to do, starting June the 1st, is to become a little bit more hyper-vigilant, pay a lot more attention, keep an eye on the weather. Keep an eye on what's out there, particularly what's out there in the Caribbean, because we will begin to start tracking anything that's out and about and trying to figure out if it poses a threat to us. This would be a really good time for you all to review your emergency plans. Now, really, you should have two emergency plans. One is your personal emergency plan, the one you have for your house, for your home, for your belongings, for your family, and get that squared away. And there are any one of a number of templates that you can access on the internet that gives you some guidelines for going through and thinking about key elements. And that's really important to do. The other thing that's going to be really important to do is to know what your own divisional or departmental or entity emergency plan is as it fits into the overall UTMB emergency plan. If you don't know where to find that, talk to your supervisor and find that out and take a look at that and see what the plan is and see what your role is in the plan. One of the other things that I think is really important is for you to know whether you are essential or non-essential. What's your classification? Essential personnel, non-essential personnel. Debbie Conley is going to talk about that a little bit more later. But I want to emphasize that there are many different kinds of essential personnel. In previous years, people were really uncomfortable about signing up or agreeing to be essential personnel. I guess that's because they thought that I was going to lock them up in the hospital during a hurricane and make them go through the hurricane with me in the hospital. Well, I'm not going to lock up too many people with me in the hospital to go through the hurricane together. So don't be uncomfortable about naming yourself as an essential personnel, because we've got lots of things that essential personnel it's important for them to do. So several things. Pay attention. We're going to make sure that communications get out to you as expeditiously as possible as these things come up. Know what your plan is, your personal plan, your the institutional plan, or your divisional plan. Know if you're essential or non-essential and what that means. And then make sure that we know how to contact you. And there's a lot of different ways to enter your contact information. Steve Campbell is going to talk about that a little bit. Now, one of the other things that I want you to be sure you do is keep on your person, keep close at hand your badge. because if we do have a problem, there's absolutely no way that you're ever going to get back into this institution after it's all over unless you've got your ID badge. Chances are you're not going to be able to get back on the island unless you have your ID and ID badge. So keep that with you, and particularly during this time. At UTMB, we have an incident command structure for dealing really with any disaster, in this case, a hurricane or a weather event. We have an incident commander, which most times is the president of the institution. And we have a number of sections that handle very key functions that we have to maintain for the institution: operations and planning and logistics and administration and finance. And I'm not going to go through those except to tell you that there's a lot of people, a lot of different subsections of these particular things, and we have more than one individual assigned to lead each one of these areas in the event of a disaster. And one last thing I want to mention, when it comes to hurricanes, we like to be able to start planning some hours, some days ahead of the time. And with hurricanes, if there is one thing that's good about a hurricane, is you do have a little bit of time to prepare. One of the things that we use is a countdown system, and we designate H hour or 0 hour, H hour, as the time when we anticipate 40-mile-an-hour winds are going to be hitting the island. We have to be a little bit more creative because we're not just on the island anymore, we're other places, and so but essentially, when we expect 40-mile-an-hour winds to be hitting our facility. Because once you get into 40-mile-an-hour winds, it's really difficult to do much of anything. So we start planning what we're going to do, and our plan goes by the hours until H hour. And generally speaking, as you can see here, we will start at about H minus 5 days, 120 hours, in terms of making our plans. And that starts with communication. Most of the time, fortunately, the hurricane never comes here, and we don't really have to do much other than to watch it and do some preliminary planning. But as we get further and further down into this plan and the storm gets closer and closer, then we have to make more aggressive decisions. What we've learned is that if we're going to evacuate the hospital, we have to evacuate the hospital on a beautiful day when the sun is shining and it looks wonderful and there's nothing in sight in terms of bad weather. That's very hard to do. But we know that it takes us about 12 hours to evacuate the hospital, and we want to have the hospital fully evacuated and shut down at least 24 hours before the onset of 40-mile-an-hour winds. So that just kind of gives you an idea about how our thinking goes as we prepare for the arrival of some major storm. I believe we have just a summary of some of the things that we've talked about relative to incident command. The incident commander is going to be leading all aspects of the operation, pretty much authorizing closure of schools and offices. And I want to point out something that's very, very important. Nobody leaves until the incident commander says to leave. So in terms of letting people off, letting people leave, whatever, you really can't do that until the incident commander okays people leaving. And Debbie will talk a little bit more about that. Supervisors, faculty need to follow the lead of the incident commander. And employees and students also follow the lead of incident commander as well as their supervisors. before I turn it over to our weather person, please take a moment and encourage your colleagues to take a moment. Go into the UTMB online directory and update your information so that we'll be able to contact you either by your cell phone, by text, by email, whatever. I would advise you not to use your home phone number as the place where that's going to be your contact, because you really want us to be able to get you essentially 24/7. I want now to turn things over to Mr. Dan Riley from the National Weather Service to give us an update on what things look like for in our 2014 hurricane season.
Okay, well, good afternoon. First question I have for you is, how many of y'all have never been through a hurricane? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you have been through a hurricane? All right, good. Everyone raised their hand to one of those. So there are some new folks, but we can all learn something new. And I'm going to talk today about the forecast for 2014, but also some things you can look at to stay aware. As the previous speaker mentioned, it's important to always keep your eye on the tropics, especially during the hurricane season. One of the best things to look at is a website called hurricanes.gov, hurricanes.gov. That's the National Hurricane Center website. And what they have right on the front page is something called a graphical tropical weather outlook. Now, I've got an example shown here. If you look at the map on the right, that's a satellite image, and what the experts at the Hurricane Center are doing is circling areas they think could develop into tropical storms and then perhaps hurricanes. And they'll assign a percentage likelihood they think that will happen. So if you look at this map here, that area right there on the left, that's been identified as an area that could develop with a 60% chance likelihood that it will become a tropical cyclone. This gets updated at least 4 times per day starting June 1st. You can take a look at this. There are actually systems out there today in the Eastern Pacific that they're keeping an eye on. Their season starts just a little bit sooner than in the Atlantic. And then each disturbance or storm has a discussion paragraph with it in that companion text product. Now this year there's actually a change. This graphical tropical weather outlook is going to be looking out not just 48 hours in advance, but 5 days in advance. So they're going to make an effort to predict what disturbances may see development in the next 5 days. Now they're not always going to be able to do that, but they've been testing this internally, and they have shown some skill. So why might this be important? We can get storms develop right in the Gulf of Mexico. Really not that unusual. It hasn't happened that often in recent years. It did happen in 2007. So, we're used to having a period of time to monitor storms, but on occasion they can pop up right off our coastline. So I do recommend looking at this tropical weather outlook every day during the hurricane season. And this is just another look at this new 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. It looks a little bit confusing. There's a lot of overlap there, especially on the left-hand panel. Those are all different disturbances that could develop, and the areas drawn are the areas where they could develop in the next 5 days. So you can sort of infer a track of those disturbances from those areas that are shown. They also plan to separate out that more complicated map into individual disturbance maps, and that's what you see on the right. So bottom line, take a look at this product during the hurricane season to give you a little extra heads up at what might develop. You don't have to wait for the first watch or warning to be issued to have an idea that there may be something we need to monitor. Another thing that's very exciting this year, we've got a new potential storm surge inundation graphic. Now, many of you all know in the past we've issued forecasts for storm surge. For example, Hurricane Ike, storm surge 10 to 15 feet. And then that required people to try to figure out, well, how will that impact me? What does that mean for me? This map is really fantastic in that it will take the storm surge forecast and essentially create a flood map for areas along the coast. And we call it a potential storm surge in that it's not taking the most likely scenario, but it's sort of looking at a lot of different possibilities and giving you one of the worst scenarios. So the idea is not to underwarn, to give people the idea that there is potential for storm surge from this storm for the areas shown. And this is a more close-up view of this product. It will be issued about the time that the watches are issued. So we're talking about 48 hours ahead of the arrival of 40-mile-per-hour winds. So again, why we like this is people can see that, they can understand it, they can see where they are, and if they could have flooding. The color shadings indicate the forecast potential depth of water above ground. So in this hypothetical storm, you can see portions of Galveston Island are in the yellows and the reds. The reds were greater than 9 feet above ground level. So you can get a really good feeling for the potential severity there. The last thing I want to quickly mention about surge is, those of y'all who went through Ike know this, the surge can arrive prior to the arrival of winds, perhaps 12 to 24 hours ahead of that. So that's something to keep in mind, because since our timelines are based mostly on winds, you have to factor in, well, maybe I need to make that decision 12 to 24 hours earlier before if you're planning to leave, if your roads get blocked from storm surge, even prior to the arrival of winds. Okay, really quickly now, the forecast for 2014. What we're looking at is a table of the number of storms on the number of hurricanes and the number of major hurricanes. The number of named storms includes tropical storms and hurricanes. And you can see the long-term average for the Atlantic, including the Gulf of Mexico, is about 12 named storms, 6 to 7 hurricanes, and 2 of those being Category 3 or higher on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Here are some of the forecasts that have come out this year. The latest one was from NOAA just yesterday. And you can see those numbers are all coming in a little bit below average for the Atlantic. So before you all take a sigh of relief, take a deep breath and think we're out of the woods, a very quiet season, 1983, also an El Nino season where we had only 4 named storms, but one of those was Hurricane Alicia, a direct impact on our area. So even though the forecast is for a relatively below average or near average season, we still need to prepare, as we do every year, that we will have an impact. And then I just wanted to quickly touch on the main factor why the numbers are predicted to be below normal. It's a phenomenon called El Nino, where on the left-hand side you can see warm water near the equator in the Pacific, anomalously warm water. It turns out that sets up atmospheric patterns that create a lot of wind shear where our storms form in the Atlantic. And that's why we typically have fewer than average storms during El Nino years. So that's all I have, really, just a real quick summary. And I'll leave you here with some links and websites, and also our Twitter handle. Please connect with us. We can push out information to you, maybe even in a little bit more detail than you might see on the TV, for example. So thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. Excuse me. Want to go over just a little bit of information. Once again, you're gonna see the same slide several times. It's to remind you about updating your information so that you can receive the alerts. But to follow up on something Dr. Richardson said, what can you do now to be prepared? Now, all of you, if you haven't already had this happen, you should be very shortly reviewing the employee acknowledgement form with your supervisor. And that's a form that tells you everything that will be expected of you in the event of an emergency situation. So I would strongly recommend that you not just go down the list and initial all the little blanks without really reading it and making sure that if one of those blanks that you have a question about, or your situation may be different in some way from the year before, that you have a conversation with your manager about that so that all of that's worked out ahead of time. Know what your role will be, as Dr. Richardson said earlier, and whom you're going to be reporting to. Make your family plans now. Don't forget your pets. It can be very distressing if there's a hurricane sitting in the Gulf and all your family's all taken care of, but you have pets that nobody wants to take care of. If your situation changes, maybe this year you've become the caretaker for an elderly parent, or you've had a baby, or you've had some change in your family situation that has an impact on your role, you need to talk to your supervisor now. If you aren't already, enroll in My Chart. In case you do relocate and you have a health problem, this is a perfect way to take your medical record with you so that if you need medications or any of those things, that can you have an easy access to it. Now, Dr. Richardson mentioned about you need to know if you're essential or non-essential. And we used to think that essential meant, as she said, I've got to stay here in John Sealy Hospital and watch the storm. But there are a number of roles that fall within this essential category. Certainly the ride-out team, which are those people who are here in Galveston, that's essential. But there are other ride-out teams. Payroll generally relocates up north someplace to make sure we all still get paid. That's a form of a ride-out team. Different departments, information services have folks that relocate somewhere. That's the type of ride-out team. So you need to know if that affects you in some way. Are you one of those people that are going to need to be working during the emergency to make sure systems continue? When we evacuate the hospital, it is very frequent that we send nurses or other healthcare professionals with patients to make sure that they arrive safely at their destination and they have the appropriate care in the meantime. So that might be an essential role. Or you might just be assigned to work at an alternate location. Or you may be asked to return as soon as the roads open. If those of you who were here after Hurricane Ike, you'll remember we didn't bring all of our employees back immediately after the storm. But we did need to bring some employees back to get the campus ready. So you need to know if you're one of those individuals. If you're non-essential, that doesn't mean you're not important. Okay, you're very important. But what it means is that you will be released by incident command at the appropriate time, and you will be away from campus or away from your work location until instructed to return. You need to have an emergency bag, especially if you're one of these essential folks. And we've tried to make that helpful for you by putting a list on our HR website. It's in the Adverse Events Toolkit, and you'll see the link to that in a minute. It tells you what you need if you're going to be on a ride-out team. It's a little bit different list than you'll find for your personal home planning. For instance, something that got added to my emergency bag after Ike was wet wipes, because we didn't have any water to wash our hands. And when I got a call from my supervisor to find as many wet wipes as I could and bring them with me, it was a lesson that, I needed to add that to my emergency bag. So we've tried to put in a list of those things that you might need if you're here. Please, please, please be on direct deposit. After our last event, there were few employees who weren't on direct deposit. We mailed paychecks to those people early, thinking we had things in hand, but we weren't quite counting on the tidal surge that occurred that caused the mail not to be delivered on that Friday. And so we will not be doing what we did in the last hurricane of sending out a finance person with a police officer to deliver cash, okay? No matter how sad the story is, we won't be delivering cash, okay? So sign up for direct deposit if at all possible. Okay, if you are essential, you should have an orange placard for your car, and you should have an orange tag for your badge. Those are essential because if you're one of those people returning early, they're not going to let you through the checkpoint if you don't have that orange tag and your UTMB badge. Okay, so be sure you have that. And we've already told you several times about updating your information. You go to Employee Self-Service on the UTMB homepage and update your contact information. Now, if you're relocating out of your normal place, that's the number it would be good for us to have. Remember that today I might not be classified as essential, but situations change, and any of us can be reclassified as essential if the situation warrants. It's important that you listen to the official communications from Incident Command and obey them. That means you don't leave before they say to leave, and it means you come back when they say to come back. So it's kind of your responsibility to keep up with the communications during the emergency so you know when we're expecting you to come back. Now, if your manager says, okay, we're prepared, we've done everything we need to do, if they want to release you early, they must have Incident Command's permission, and then it's your time. It's not administrative leave. It's your vacation, okay? So if you leave before the Incident Command says to evacuate, and even with your supervisor's approval, it's your time until that official notification comes. You should also be prepared if you're on a ride-out team that sometimes you're asked to do things that are a little different than your normal role. If you're here on campus especially, you may be asked to do something out of the ordinary. Remain at your workstation until released by your supervisor and Incident Command. Now, a question that always comes up is, am I going to get paid, and how am I going to get paid? So if you are currently a non-exempt employee, that means you're eligible for overtime, and you work during the emergency. You work here in Galveston, or you're at another location doing work during that time, and you're required to stay there. You will be paid for all hours worked, and any hours you're required to remain on site, and you'll get overtime if you exceed the 40 hours. Okay, so if you're here and you sleep here and you work during the storm, you're going to get paid for that whole time, including overtime when appropriate. Exempt employees, that means those of you who are not eligible for overtime or paid salary, you'll be paid your regular salary and possibly, depending on the length of the emergency, a lump sum at the end of the emergency. And that'll be based on the severity of the situation and how long it lasts. We won't be given comp time. You remember, in the past, we have sometimes given comp time, but we won't be doing that. You'll be given possibly a lump sum. Non-essential. When Incident Command gives the instruction to leave, you'll leave and you will receive administrative leave, that's paid leave, for your regularly scheduled shift, beginning at whatever time the emergency is designated to begin. Okay, you won't be paid overtime, even though you may usually work overtime. You'll be paid your base salary. That's the administrative leave you'll get. So you'll get 8 hours a day while you're on administrative leave. The maximum, generally, they'll be granted is 40 hours. If it's an extreme situation, then Dr. Callender can grant additional leave hours. If you stay off more than 40 hours and additional leave hours haven't been approved, it'll be your own accruals, or leave without a pay if you don't have accruals. In other words, if I decide to evacuate to Arizona and I get called, I hear I'm supposed to be back, at the time that I'm supposed to be back, from then on, it's my own time, even though it might have taken me longer to drive back. Now, we have some resources on the web for you. The policy that's been referred to throughout our staffing during adverse conditions has all the stuff I've just talked about. The acknowledgement form is out there. Be sure that you've gone over the one with your supervisor. And then the Adverse Events Toolkit has a lot of things that are for employees and managers. There are forms if the electricity goes out and we can't enter time electronically. There are paper time sheets. There are rosters for managers to have contact information for their employees. There are a lot of things that might be useful. So I would encourage you to take a look at it. Okay.
My name is Lieutenant Raymond Cooper, and obviously you can tell by my attire I'm with the police department. I'm here to speak with you about badge requirements and securing property. And this was discussed earlier with Debbie, if you're an E or essential employee, you need to obtain an orange card or a placard from your manager. If you already have that, just maintain that. And if you don't have one, just get with your manager. Usually these are issued out if we think that a storm is going to hit. The hospital distributes those out to all the managers, and then the manager can distribute those to the employees under their span of control. The e-card, once you have that into possession, ensures entry into parking garages during emergency status. Currently, the garages are either by persons get a token to go into the garage, or you have a contract monthly where you pay, or you pull a tab and go in. But during the emergency situation, we'll allow persons to park in our garages. And if you have this placard on your card, then the police officer or the parking attendant working there will allow you entry into the garage. If you want to park in the garage during an emergency situation and you don't have this card, you simply are not going to be allowed to park in that garage. So debating with the person there at entry is futile. Also, as it's been alluded to earlier, having the orange e-card on your ID badge helps to ensure your passage through the island checkpoints and also re-entry into buildings and onto the campus itself. If you weren't here for the hurricane, what happens is the police secure the island after the persons are asked to evacuate. And then we have police checkpoints at all the ferry locations and bridge locations. And so just to get back onto the island, let's say you're coming down 45, you're going to encounter police, either Galveston Police Department, Galveston County Sheriff's Office, and in our case as well, UTMB police officers. So if you don't have your UTMB ID along with one of these E1 cards, you most likely are not going to enter into the island. If you got back on the island somehow and you're trying to enter into UTMB campus, and more specifically one of our buildings, the police department is not going to allow you into the building without your UTMB ID and your E1 card. You may say to yourself, well, gosh, I've been working here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or whatever. The police officer knows me. Surely they'll let me in the building. That's not the case. If you don't have your ID with you and your E1 card, we are not going to let you into your building. And the reason for that is prior to the hurricane, as long as all the electronics are working properly and somebody has employment here, we're able to verify that you're a current employee and that you have E1 status to get into a building. But because of the hurricane, let's use me as an example. Let's say I'm an employee with the police department, and either on or before the storm, I'm terminated. Well, Chief Ingalls knows that I'm terminated, but Human Resource, the badge office, the key office, or any of the other 12,000 persons on campus may not know that I've been terminated. So they may recognize me as, oh yeah, that's Officer Cooper. I know him. He's been working here 8 years. We'll let him in the building. Well, if I don't have my ID with me, my E1 card, we are not going to let you in the building. So if we wouldn't let a police officer in the building, we're not going to let anybody else in there. So please maintain your ID card and maintain your E1 card if you're an E-Essential employee. And as we've been talking about, you need to display the orange E1 card at all times with your UTMB ID and on your vehicle. If you're going to drive one on campus or into the island or park in one of our garages, keep the placard on your dash so that we can determine that that vehicle is supposed to be there. And then once again, regardless if it's a storm or not, we want you by policy to carry your UTMB ID with you at all times. Regarding property, we ask that you take all your personal valuables from your office once we know that a storm is likely to hit. Reason for this is that even if you secure your office and lock them up, depending on the type of storm, if you encounter any kind of flooding or damage to windows or doors or whatever, unauthorized persons may enter into your office. And even if unauthorized entry doesn't occur because of water, you may end up losing the item that you left behind because of water damage. We recommend that you conduct an inventory of the office items before you leave and then after you return. Certainly nowadays with electronics, it's easy to create something electronically, but we recommend that you print off a hard copy of that and keep the hard copy and/or electronic copy off campus at another safe location, because when you left, your office is secure. When you come back, the office may be damaged because of unauthorized entry or because of the water or wind. And so if you don't have the hard copy or electronic copy with you, you may not be able to do an inventory. Anyway, so create a list of the things that are in your office prior to the storm, and then conduct an inventory once you return. And then you'll want to report any missing items or suspicious activity to both the police department and your immediate supervisor. If you don't have contact numbers for the police department, they're listed on the screen there. Please write those down. The top number, 1111, is the emergency number on campus, and the 2691 is non-emergency number. And as been discussed earlier, please await instructions from leadership before entering the island, before entering a building, and also once you've been allowed back on campus and into your building or office. Don't discard any damaged property without permission. And the reason being is that even if you've looked at it and it certainly looks like it's damaged and it's not repairable, for police purposes, if a crime has occurred, we need to preserve the area and the damaged property so that we can conduct an investigation if somebody has entered into your area in an unauthorized fashion and committed a crime. And if it's not a crime, the item needs to remain intact so that for insurance and replacement and repair purposes, so we don't want to throw those away. So wait for leadership before discarding anything. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. So the last topic we're going to wrap up with this afternoon is specifically about communications and how we're going to keep you up to date about what's going on. What I want you to think about is communications on two different levels: broader overall communications, and then specifically communications about what's happening at your particular work unit. Those high-level communications will be broad things like what's going on with the weather and the storm, what's really going on about here on campus, and really ultimately the communication from the incident commander that says stay, go, or return. It'll be very important for you to use the variety of channels that we actually have available today. So the website, email, the social media of Facebook and Twitter, and then the news is also going to be a very important vehicle to keep up to date about actually what is going on here. I do want to say, though, that we also need to be prepared, depending upon the intensity of the storm, that any of these communication channels could end up being going down, and there might not be any communications for a period of time. Then I think also as well, then your work unit communications is the other critical piece. Each work unit should have a very detailed communication plan, and the way in which you as an individual would work with your supervisor based upon the incident command of go, stay, or return. What does that specifically mean for you? When are you released from work? When will you be called back from work? And what that communication channel would begin to look like. What I want to spend time on is, surprise, you've probably seen this a couple of times today, and you're going to hear about this over and over and over again. UTMB alerts, and specifically Go Mobile with UTMB alerts, is the most reliable, effective, and efficient way to keep up to speed with what's going on. It is the most dependable. Text is typically the most dependable in a storm, and then followed by mobile phone communications. Outside, actually, on the back table as you go out, we do have a handout. It's a 2-page handout. One page is a checklist, and then the other page is a good communication guide that kind of walks you through the way in which you can stay up to speed. But what I want to encourage you to do is go to the directory and update your alert communications area. So if you specifically go onto utmb.edu, you go into the directory, you search for yourself. You'll find a button on there that says edit information that you will then go into, that will then take you into employee self-service. You'll move through employee self-service, you'll pick your personal information, and then you're going to go to the employee emergency alert notification button. This is different than your emergency contact. Your emergency contact is what happens to me. Who am I going to call in case of an emergency? The emergency alert notification says, how are we going to communicate with you in terms of an emergency? We are really encouraging, and I'm really asking you to first pick SMS or text using your mobile phone number, then mobile phone voicemail, followed by business phone, business email, and then personal and home. As Dr. Richardson says, in the case of an emergency, you may not be home, and you may not be able to get the communication there. Most of us have our cell phone, most of us have a mobile phone, and that's the most effective way. So I am going to really encourage everyone to go in, update that information, go in this afternoon, and update that information and make sure that that stays current and up to date. I think with that, any questions? Dr. Richardson, if you've got any closing comments?
Well, thanks to our participants, and thank you all for spending your lunch hour getting ready for hurricanes. I will commit to is to get information out as expeditiously and as accurately as possible. Hurricanes are tricky. I've always said that when it comes to hurricanes, you never can do the right thing. But we will try to get information out as as I said, as accurately and expeditiously as possible so that you'll know how to plan, so we'll be able to get ready if it looks like we're going to be in that situation. If you have any questions that come up, I'm very easy to find. You can always contact me. I'd be glad to help out. Debbie Conley's a great resource relative to HR. Mike Mastrangelo, who did not speak today, but who is our institutional emergency officer, is going to be here. We always get very good support from the UTMB Police Department, and we appreciate the weather update. We hope this is another quiet year. Thank you very much.
UTMB Health, working together to work wonders.